What do you get when a smug TV host takes aim at a governor who leads like he's searching for his car in a Target parking lot? Greg Gutfeld absolutely dismantles Tim Walz, turning his policies into punchlines and his leadership into late-night fodder. From missteps to mismanagement, Gutfeld roasts the Minnesota governor with the precision of a seasoned comic and the fury of a fed-up taxpayer. No breaks, no mercy, just a fiery takedown that's funnier than it should be. Oh, Tim Walz. If political leadership were a buffet, he'd be the lukewarm mashed potatoes no one asked for but somehow landed on your plate. Bland, pointless, and stubbornly present. Then comes Greg Gutfeld, wielding sarcasm like a chainsaw in a fireworks shop, shredding Walz's nonsense with the flair of a hyperactive Dexter doing stand-up. This isn't leadership, it's performance art, if the art involved finger painting with expired condiments. Gutfeld's takedown is sharp, savage, and wildly entertaining. Let's be honest, Tim Walz governing Minnesota is like a substitute teacher trying to wrangle a class of caffeinated raccoons. He speaks like a man who skimmed leadership for dummies and thought, "Perfect, I'm ready to lead." As for execution, flawless. If the mission is transforming the land of 10,000 lakes into the land of 10,000 terrible ideas, it's chaos, confusion, and comedy, just not the intentional kind. Greg Gutfeld barely had to break a sweat. Roasting Tim Walz is like slam dunking on a guy who shows up to a job interview in Crocs while blindfolded. Walz practically arrived at the debate wielding a kazoo and a whiteboard scrawled with one word: feelings. He handed Gutfeld a platter labeled extra crispy, leaned in and whispered, "Go savage." At this point, it's not comedy. It's a full-contact sport of sarcasm. Yet Walz brought glitter glue and a participation ribbon for this doomed talent show. Let's start with the economy. Tim Walz stared at inflation, rising unemployment, and an outbound stampede of businesses, and somehow concluded, more taxes, that'll fix it. Tax oxygen, tax smiles, tax anyone merely contemplating a move to South Dakota. Companies now flee Minnesota as if the state were a haunted mansion constructed entirely from COVID mandates and social justice PowerPoints. Gutfeld shredded Walz's economic blueprint like a raccoon raiding a compost bin, cracking, "How did you make California look like Ayn Rand's vacation home?" The only things swelling here are government paperwork and the middle class's collective migraine. Now, crime. Walz approaches public safety the way a toddler approaches fireworks, hopeful, clueless, and inevitably surrounded by sirens. His solution to surging violence? Blame society, form a circle, and pray the offenders are swayed by interpretive dance. It's the policy equivalent of handing out lavender candles in a 3-alarm fire. Meanwhile, Gutfeld cackles from the sidelines, gleefully noting that Minnesota's toughest new law seems to be against the emotion, confidence. Good luck with that, Governor. Meanwhile, Gutfeld is basically doing stand-up with spreadsheets. He flashes a map of Minnesota emblazoned with the warning, "Here be carjackings," splashed across the Twin Cities, likening Walz's crime plan to a mall cop attempting to quell a riot armed only with a kazoo and a clipboard. If Walz handled national security, Duolingo would release Russian for Dummies by next Tuesday. Now, education. Cue the glittering dumpster fire. Walz, a former teacher, because of course, has transformed Minnesota classrooms into shrines of woke word salad. Goodbye algebra and biology. Hello extra credit for spotting microaggressions and assembling safe spaces out of popsicle sticks. Gutfeld doesn't merely drip sarcasm, he opens the hydrant. The only test Minnesota students ace is the perpetual offense final. Under Walz, school resembles performance art more than learning. Detention is swapped for a participation ribbon, a TikTok therapy break, and an interpretive dance apology circle. Report cards now arrive lavender-scented, stamped feelings first, while parents secretly Google homeschooling guides after dinner. Meanwhile, classroom budgets shrink faster than December daylight in the northern prairie chill. Let's talk about Tim Walz's COVID policies, because wow. He handled the pandemic like it was his shot at America's next top authoritarian. He shut down businesses, arrested bar owners, fined churches, but protests? Totally fine. Apparently, the virus respects political beliefs. Greg Gutfeld feasted on the irony, pointing out that Walz canceled Grandma's bingo night but rolled out the red carpet for mass demonstrations, so long as they included a Marxist chant and a papier-mâché puppet. That wasn't public health policy, it was political theater with a clipboard, and then there's the budget surplus. Minnesota had a windfall so massive even Walz couldn't pretend it didn't exist. So did he return it to taxpayers? Of course not. Instead, he treated it like monopoly money at a government yard sale. More bureaucracy? Check. A fresh fleet of diversity consultants? You bet. And maybe, just maybe, a taxpayer-funded mural of himself gazing solemnly into the distance, pondering the next program no one asked for. Fiscal responsibility. Not under Walz. He's spending your money like it's someone else's because it is. Gutfeld practically keeled over from irony fatigue, quipping, "Watching Walz burn through a surplus is like handing a toddler a platinum card and telling him to buy only essentials." Sure, Tim. The Department of Overregulation clearly required that top-of-the-line espresso bar and gender equity executive yoga retreat. Bureaucracy under Walz has become a contact sport. In Minnesota, you can't run a lemonade stand without 14 permits, a background check, and an official pronoun affidavit. It's Soviet Minnesota, snazzier branding, worse results. Gutfeld jokes that Walz is chasing a gold medal in bureaucratic gymnastics. Each policy involves more flips, spins, and contortions than a Cirque du tax audit. Then there's his awkward bromance with Gavin Newsom. Walz gazes west like a heart-struck teen, determined to remake Minneapolis into San Francisco's frostbitten, less competent cousin. If Newsom sneezes, Walz grabs a tissue. If California passes a fee, Minnesota drafts 3 committees to study how to copy it. Meanwhile, taxpayers wonder why common sense vanished. He watches Gavin Newsom torch California like a sandalwood candle carved from terrible policy and thinks, brilliant. Now let's add frostbite and subtract jobs. It's the entire West Coast disaster script performed in snow boots, with fewer vowels and higher property taxes. Gutfeld didn't hold back. If Gavin Newsom is a walking shampoo commercial with the ego of a Bond villain, then Tim Walz is the understudy who wandered on stage mid-scene and started ad-libbing in Pig Latin. Walz struts like the absolutely loved child of Bernie Sanders and a malfunctioning traffic light, posing as a progressive savior while tripping over every agency he touches. Transportation? Please. The governor hawked a multi-million-dollar bullet train that might be completed right around the time velociraptors get reaccredited by the Smithsonian. Meanwhile, Minnesota's highways resemble a post-apocalyptic Mario Kart level. Residents would truly like their suspension systems to survive the decade. Instead, Walz keeps flogging fantasy rail lines as if auditioning for Hogwarts, while real bridges crumble faster than gluten-free toast left on the radiator. But hey, at least the press releases arrive on time, even if nothing else does. Greg Gutfeld rolled his eyes with such ferocity that seismologists probably logged a new fault line. The sarcasm hanging over the studio was thick enough to charge rent. "Brilliant, Governor," he sighed. "Toss common sense in the recycle bin and pour billions into Elon Musk fanfiction on rails, because nothing screams fiscal wizardry like a bullet train to nowhere, slower than the DMV, less practical than a solar flashlight in January." This icy spectacle drains wallets, patience, and optimism the Midwest shelters. Walz's media appearances feel like cosplay for competent leadership, delivered in the garbled cadence of a dial-up modem drowning in a koi pond. He wanders through sentences like a lost tourist clutching a broken GPS. Somewhere backstage, staffers fling flashcards and distress flares, praying he completes a thought. Gutfeld sliced through the chaos like a caffeinated slam poet, observing that watching Walz explain policy resembles a raccoon tapping Morse code while wearing oven mitts. Baffling, a little frightening, yet inexplicably sure of success. It's not merely awkward. It's a full-tilt Olympic spectacle of verbal gymnastics no taxpayer ever bought a ticket to witness. Tim Walz doesn't merely pivot when grilled. He pirouettes like a ballerina juiced on 5 Red Bulls and a stack of Atlantic back issues. Ask him about skyrocketing crime, and suddenly bike lanes are the magic cure for felonies. Point to a wheezing economy, and he'll lecture you on gender-neutral parking lots and the emotional burden of asphalt. Governance has become interpretive policy theater. Every crisis spawns a TED-style monologue on feelings and a slideshow about community healing through ukulele circles. Greg Gutfeld nails the absurdity, branding Walz a magic 8-ball in orthopedic shoes. Shake him, and out pops vague jargon about intersectional frameworks or equity gardening. Image management is no better. Walz swaggers like a folksy farm dad, yet roughing it means drinking almond milk without a paper straw. He's the guy who shows up at a tailgate with kombucha and asks whether the brisket is locally sourced. Gutfeld's roast lands like a drone strike. Folksy, my foot. Walz is as relatable as tofu at a monster truck rally. Nothing shouts working-class hero like quoting Noam Chomsky while adjusting a branded fleece vest. Meanwhile, taxpayers just want potholes filled, not philosophical haikus about asphalt equity scribbled across another multi-million-dollar PowerPoint slide before budget season. Minnesota's rural towns are shouting into the void like someone trying to cancel dial-up in 2025. They wanted a governor who talks tractor, understands real work, and still makes the church potluck circuit. Instead, they got Tim Walz, a leader who seems to think greater Minnesota begins at the last bike lane bollard and ends when the kombucha taps run dry. This isn't governance, it's lifestyle branding dripping with buzzwords. Walz operates as if he's live-streaming a TED Talk titled, Empathy Through Bureaucracy. Gutfeld's parting haymaker? He dubbed Walz the IKEA governor. Arrives flat-packed, missing screws, assembly absolutely required, and leaves you sobbing beside a listing contraption wondering whether you built furniture or a metaphor. Walz treats policy like a Pinterest board, convinced that governing means filtering reality through interpretive dance hashtags and oat milk foam. Gutfeld pierced the facade like X-ray goggles at a nonsense convention. Each bloated program, every word salad soundbite, each sanctimonious sermon in leadership's costume, he filleted with surgical sarcasm and the precision of a caffeinated hawk. The roast didn't merely sear, it slow-cooked Walz's oatmeal-flavored governance into unrecognizable mush. The cruel punchline? Walz likely walked away believing he'd enjoyed a TED Talk tribute. Minnesota deserves more than a glorified group project in khakis, and Gutfeld, wielding punchlines sharper than a DMV pencil, reminded America that behind the fleece vest and passive-aggressive grin stands a man navigating by expired IKEA instructions. Confused, underwhelming, missing half the hardware, Walz keeps tightening the wrong bolts while citizens pray their state doesn't collapse like disco-era drywall. Roads crack, farms struggle, Main Street dims, yet Walz tweets slogans as though hashtags can pave potholes and harvest corn before the next legislative session begins. Reality, however, keeps sending invoices that no amount of virtue can pay back timely.